Good your coffee.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to Library Limited this evening. We're pleased to welcome Frank McCourt. He is the author of the new book, Angela's Ashes, which is doing extremely well now. It's been written up in the Times twice in the last 3 weeks, I think. The book is his memoir of his childhood in Ireland till the time he was 19. He was also a creative writing teacher at Stuyvesant High School in New York City for a very long time. We'd like to welcome him.
She was there.
I was there.
I think at occasions like this, I think you're required to read a few passages to give you a taste of what the book is like, or to give you the music of the language in my own voice. This book, I called it Angela's Ashes because I didn't know what else to call it. I intended it to go on much farther till the time my mother died in New York in 1981 in Lenox Hill Hospital. And if I had done that, it would be a 5-foot shelf of a book. So I stopped. My editor to it at Scribner, Nan Graham, thought it would be a good idea to just come back to America, kind of a circular motion like Finnegan's Wake and books like that, to arrive in America and stop there and then leave you asking for more. That's if you're asking for more. And if you are, you're going to get it. This is the, I'm just going to read the opening passage, which in the movie business is called an establishing shot, about Limerick. My father and mother should have stayed in New York where they met and married and where I was born. Instead, they returned to Ireland when I was 4, my brother Malachy 3, the twins Oliver and Eugene barely 1, and my sister Margaret dead and gone. When I look back at my childhood, I wonder how I survived it all. It was, of course, a miserable childhood. Happy childhood is hardly worth your while. Worse than the ordinary miserable childhood is the miserable Irish childhood. And worse yet is the miserable Irish Catholic childhood. People everywhere brag and whimper about the woes of their early years, but nothing can compare with the Irish version. The poverty, the shiftless, loquacious alcoholic father, the pious, defeated mother moaning by the fire, pompous priests bullying schoolmasters, the English, and the terrible things they did to us for 800 long years. Above all, we were wet. Out in the Atlantic Ocean, great sheets of rain gathered to drift slowly up the River Shannon and settle forever in Limerick. The rain dampened the city from the Feast of the Circumcision to New Year's Eve. It created a cacophony of hacking coughs, bronchial rattles, asthmatic wheezes, consumptive croaks. It turned noses into fountains, lungs into bacterial sponges. It provoked cures galore. To ease the catarrh, you boil onions in milk, blackened with pepper. For the congested passages, you made a paste of boiled flour and nettles, wrapped it in a rag and slapped it, sizzling, on the chest. From October to April, the walls of Limerick glistened with the damp. Clothes never dried. Tweed and woolen coats housed living things. Sometimes sprouted mysterious vegetations. In pubs, steam rose from damp bodies and garments to be inhaled with cigarette and pipe smoke, laced with the stale fumes of a spilled stout and whiskey, and tinged with the odor of piss, wafting from the outdoor jakes where many a man puked up his week's wages. The rain drove us into the church, our refuge, our strength, our only dry place. At Mass, benediction, novenas, we huddled in great damp clumps, dozing through priest drone, while steam rose again from our clothes to mingle with the sweetness of incense, flowers, and candles. Limerick gained a reputation for piety, but we knew it was only the rain. Much of the book deals with my father. Well, we had a unique arrangement in our family because my father's from the north of Ireland, and they're different from the rest of Ireland. At the moment, and then they were under British rule, and that makes people different. And the British are still there. They won't go home, which, we've invited them to go home. We've told them what Benjamin Franklin said, that fish and visitors stink in 3 days, but they won't go. They're leaving Hong Kong, but they won't leave Ireland. So my mother from the south of Ireland, which is a more, well, like all southern places, an easier place. She didn't have the, well, I was about to say she didn't have the work ethic, neither did he. He had a problem with the drink. And when he did get a job, it went like this. When Dad gets a job, Mom is cheerful and she sings. Anyone can see why I wanted your kiss. It had to be, and the reason is this. Could it be true? Someone like you could love me, love me. When Dad brings home the first week's wages, Mom is delighted. She can pay the lovely Italian men in the grocery shop, and she can hold her head up again, because there's nothing worse in the world than to owe and to be beholden to anyone. She cleans the kitchen, washes the mugs and plates, brushes crumbs and bits of food from the table, cleans out the icebox, and orders a fresh block of ice from another Italian. She buys toilet paper that we can take down the hall to the lavatory, and that, she says, is better than having headlines from the Daily News blackening your arse. She boils water on the stove and spends the day at a great tin tub washing our shirts and socks, diapers for the twins, our 2 sheets, our 3 towels. She hangs everything out in the clothesline behind the apartment house, and we can watch the clothes dance in wind and sun. She says you wouldn't want the neighbors to know what you have in the way of a wash, but there's nothing like the sweetness of clothes dried by the sun. When Dad brings home the first week's wages on a Friday night, we know the weekend will be wonderful. On Saturday night, Mom will boil water on the stove and wash us in the great tin tub, and Dad will dry us. Malachi will turn around and show he's behind. Dad will pretend to be shocked, and we'll all laugh. Mom will make hot cocoa, and we'll be able to stay up while Dad tells a story out of his head. All we have to do is to say a name, Mr. McAdory or Mr. Leibowitz down the hall, and Dad would have the 2 of them rowing up a river in Brazil, chased by Indians with green noses and puce shoulders. On nights like that, we can drift off to sleep knowing there will be a breakfast of eggs, fried tomatoes, fried bread, tea with lashings of sugar and milk, and later in the day a big dinner of mashed potatoes, peas and ham, and a trifle. And a trifle Mom makes, layers of fruit and warm, delicious custard on a cake soaked in sherry. When Dad brings home the first week's wages and the weather is fine, Mom takes us to the playground. She sits on a bench and talks to Minnie McAdory. She tells Minnie stories about characters in Limerick, and Minnie tells her about characters in Belfast. And they laugh, because there are funny people in Ireland, north and south. Then they teach each other sad songs, and Malachi and I leave the swings and seesaws to sit with them on the bench and sing. A group of young soldiers one night in a camp were talking of sweethearts they had. All seemed so merry except one young lad, and he was downhearted and sad. Come and join us, said one of the boys. Surely there's someone for you. But Ned shook his head and proudly he said, I am in love with 2. Each like a mother to me, from neither of them shall I part. For one is my mother, God bless her, I love her, the other is my sweetheart. Malachi and I sing that song, and Mom and Minnie laugh till they cry at the way Malachi takes a deep bow and holds his arms out to Mom at the end. Dan McAdory comes along on his way home from work and says, Rudy Valley better start worrying about the competition. When we go home, Mom makes tea and bread and jam or mashed potatoes with butter and salt. Dad drinks the tea and eats nothing. Mom says, God above, how can you work all day and not eat? He says, the tea is enough. She says, you'll ruin your health. And he tells her again that food is a shock to the system. He drinks his tea and tells us stories and shows us letters and words in the Daily News. Or he smokes a cigarette, stares at the wall, runs his tongue over his lips. When Dad's job goes into the 3rd week, he does not bring home the wages. On Friday night, we wait for him, and Mom gives us bread and tea. The darkness comes down, the lights come on along Classen Avenue. Other men with jobs are home already and having eggs for dinner, because you can't have meat on a Friday. You can hear the families talking upstairs and downstairs and down the hall, and Bing Crosby is singing on the radio, Brother, can you spare a dime? Malachi and I play with the twins. We know Ma'am won't sing Anyone Can See Why I Wanted Your Kiss. She sits at the table talking to herself. What am I going to do till it's late? And Dad rolls up the stairs singing Roddy McCauley. He pushes in the door and calls for us. Where are my troops? Where are my 4 warriors? Ma'am says, leave these boys alone. They're gone to bed half hungry because you have to fill your belly with whiskey. He comes to the bedroom door. Up, boys, up. A nickel for everyone who promises to die for Ireland. Up, boys, up. Francis, Malachi, Oliver, Eugene, the Red Branch Knights, the Fenian men, the IRA. Up, up. Ma'am is at the kitchen table shaking, her hair hanging damp, her face wet. Can't you leave them alone, she says. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, isn't it enough you come home without a penny in your pocket, without making fools of the children on top of it? She comes to us. Go back to bed, she says. I want them up, he says. I want them ready for the day Ireland will be free from the centre to the sea. Don't cross me, she says, for if you do, it'll be a sorry day in your mother's house. He pulls his cap down over his face and cries, my poor mother, poor Ireland, oh, what are we going to do? Ma'am says, you're pure stone mad, and she tells us again to go to bed. On the morning of the 4th Friday of Dad's job, Ma'am asks him if he'll be home tonight with his wages, or will he drink everything again? He looks at us and shakes his head at Ma'am as if to say, oh, you shouldn't talk like that in front of the children. Ma'am keeps at him, I'm asking you, are you coming home so that we can have a bit of supper, or will it be midnight with no money in your pocket and you singing Kevin Barry and the rest of the sad songs? He puts on his cap, shoves his hands into his trousers pocket, sighs and looks up at the ceiling. I told you before I'll be home, he says. And of course, that he doesn't come home that night, and that was one of the big problems in our family because he would get a job, and usually in the 3rd or 4th week, he'd go out on the Friday night when they're paid, and he wouldn't come home. And my mother used to say, this is when we were small, when we lived in Brooklyn, till I was 4, and she would put the twins in the pram, in the baby carriage, and take Malachi and me along with her, and we'd go to whatever factory he worked in Brooklyn, and wait for the men to come out at 5 o'clock to see if we could catch him on the way out. But he was very clever. He always found another gate. So he went off, and then we'd have to go around to the bars around the Long Island Railroad Station in Brooklyn. There were a whole series of Irish bars. And she'd go in, and she'd send me in. Is my father here? Is my father here? So this, and then of course we wouldn't find him. Then it was a long walk back to the house in Classen Avenue. So he had the disease of alcoholism, and he mystified me. When we went back to Ireland when I was 4, Dad gets his first job in Limerick at the cement factory, and Ma'am is happy. She won't have to stand in the queue at the St. Vincent de Paul Society asking for clothes and boots for Malachi and me. She says it's not begging, it's charity. But Dad says it's begging and it's shameful. Ma'am says she can now pay off the few pounds she owes at Kathleen O'Connor's, and she can pay back what she owes her own mother. She hates to be under obligation to anyone, especially her own mother. The cement factory is miles outside Limerick, and that means Dad has to be out of the house by 6 in the morning. He doesn't mind because he's used to the long walks. The night before, she makes him a flask of tea, a sandwich, a hard-boiled egg. She feels sorry for him the way he has to walk 3 miles out and 3 miles back. A bicycle would be handy, but you'd have to be working for a year for the price of it. Friday's payday. Ma'am is out of bed early, cleaning the house and singing. Anyone can see why I wanted your kiss. It had to be, and the reason is this. There isn't much to clean in our house. She sweeps the kitchen floor and the floor of Italy upstairs. She washes the 4 jam jars we use for mugs. She says if Dad's job lasts, we'll get proper cups and maybe saucers, and someday, with the help of God and his blessed mother, we'll have sheets on the bed. And if we save a long time, a blanket or 2, instead of those old coats which people must have left behind during the Great Famine. She boils water and washes the rags to keep Michael from shitting all over the pram and the house itself. Oh, she says, we'll have a lovely tea when your pop brings home the wages tonight. Pop, she says. That means she's in a good mood. Sirens and whistles go off all over the city when the men finish work at 5:30. Malachi and I are excited because we know that when your father works and brings home the wages, you get the Friday penny. We know this from other boys whose fathers work. And we know that after your tea, you can go to Kathleen O'Connell's shop and buy sweets. If your mother's in a good mood, she might even give you tuppence to go to the Lyric Cinema the next day to see a film with James Cagney. The men who work in factories and shops in the city are coming into the lanes to have their supper, wash themselves and go to the pub. The women go to the films at the Coliseum or the Lyric Cinema. They buy sweets and Wild Woodbine cigarettes. And if their husbands have worked a long time, they treat themselves to boxes of Black Magic chocolates. They love the romance films, and they have a great time crying their eyes out when there's an unhappy ending or a handsome lover goes away to be shot by Hindus and other non-Catholics. We have to wait a long time for Dad to walk the miles from the cement factory. We can't have our tea till he's home, and that's very hard, because you smell the cooking of other families in the lane. Ma'am says it's a good thing payday is Friday when you can't eat meat, because the smell of bacon or sausages in other houses would drive her out of her mind. We could still have bread and cheese and a nice jam jar of tea with lashings of milk and sugar, and what more do you want? The women are gone to the cinemas, the men are in the pubs, and still Dad isn't home. Ma'am says it's a long way to the cement factory, even if he is a fast walker. She says that, but her eyes are watery, and she's not singing anymore. She's sitting by the fire, smoking a Wild Woodbine she got on credit from Kathleen O'Connell. The fag is the only luxury she has, and she'll never forget Kathleen for her goodness. She doesn't know how long she can keep the water boiling in the kettle. There's no use making the tea till Dad gets home, because it will be stewed, curdled, boiled, and unfit to drink. Malachy says he's hungry, and she gives him a piece of bread and cheese to keep him going. She says this job could be the saving of us. 'Tis hard enough for him to get a job with his northern accent. And if he loses this one, I don't know what we come to do. Does he come home? No. That was our life. Then the war came. Well, the Second World War was, for us, a blessing. Most of people think of the Second World War as an awful disaster, but you don't know what it was like in Ireland when it gave the men an opportunity to go off to England and work in the factories and to join the British Army and win the war for the British. It's not generally known that the Irish won the war. Sometimes people think it was American intervention, but it was unemployed Irishmen fighting. It was always thus. How do you think England conquered half the world, or most of the world? Why do you think the sun never set on the British Empire? Because of the Irish. We conquered Africa and Australia, and won the First World War and the Second World War. So money was coming back. And people used to say, well, it's very sad how the Germans are bombing England and so on. People, women and children are dying over there. But look what the English did to us for 800 long years. This is all we heard. So the money was coming back, and families around us were beginning to look rich. They had electric light. We had no electric light in the lane. So now the men were sending back the money. One by one, the houses got electric light. All the houses except the McCourts. We're still waiting for my father to send the money. We still had the candle. And one way we had of amusing ourselves was when we went home. Play acting. We made plays about everything. We'd go home, and our house was dark and bleak. All the other houses are blazing with light. We'd go in the door and we'd say, "Switch on the light, Malachy." And he'd pretend to switch on the light, and we'd all fall around the floor laughing at the very idea of having electricity. But we thought we'd have it someday. Then time passes, and we're in Ireland, and my mother gets, after my first communion, which was a disastrous day for me, and my confirmation day was a disastrous day for me. The 2 times I got married were disastrous days for me. I think my funeral is going to be disaster too. So, in other words, I have an uneasy time with the church and its sacraments, which I'll get to in a minute. But my mother got an idea one time that we should be respectable. So she made a decision. On a Saturday morning, Ma'am finishes her tea and says, "You're going to dance." "Dance? Why?" "You're 7 years old, you made your first communion, and now it's just time for the dancing. I'm taking you down to Catherine Street to Mrs. O'Connor's Irish dancing classes. You'll go there every Saturday morning, and that'll keep you off the streets. That'll keep you from wandering around Limerick with the hooligans. She tells me wash my face, not forgetting ears and neck, comb my hair, blow my nose, take that look off my face. What look? Never mind. Just take it off. Put on my stockings and my first communion shoes, which, she says, are destroyed because I can't pass a canister or a rock without kicking it. She's worn out standing in the queue at the St. Vincent de Paul Society, begging for boots for me and Malachi so that we can wear out our toes with the kicking. Your father says it's never too early to learn the songs and dances of your ancestors. What's ancestors? Never mind. You're going to dance. I wonder how I can die for Ireland if I have to sing and dance for Ireland too. I wonder why they never say, oh, you can eat sweets and stay home from school and go swimming for Ireland. Ma'am says, don't get smart or I'll warm your ear. Cyril Benson dances. He has medals hanging from his shoulders to his kneecaps. He wins contests all over Ireland, and he looks lovely in his saffron kilts. He's a credit to his mother, and he gets his name in the paper all the time, and you can be sure he brings home the odd few pounds. You don't see him roaming the streets, kicking everything in sight till the toes hang out of his boots. Oh no, he's a good boy, dancing for his poor mother. Ma'am wets an old towel and scrubs my face till it stings. She wraps the towel around her finger and sticks it in my ears and claims there's enough wax there to grow potatoes. She wets my hair to make it lie down. She tells me shut up and stop the whinging, that these dancing lessons will cost her sixpence every Saturday, which I could have earned bringing Bill Galvin his dinner, and God knows she can barely afford it. I tried to tell her, ma'am, sure, you don't have to send me to dancing school when you could be smoking a nice wood-wind cigarette and having a cup of tea, but she says, oh, you're very clever, aren't you? You're going to dance if I have to give up the fags forever. If my pals see my mother dragging me through the streets to Irish dancing class, I'd be disgraced entirely. They think it's all right to dance and pretend you're Fred Astaire because you can jump all over the screen with Ginger Rogers. There's no Ginger Rogers in Irish dancing, and you can't jump all over. You can stand straight up. You stand straight up and down and keep your arms against yourself and kick your legs up and around and never, never smile. My uncle Pat Hating said Irish dancers look like they have steel rods up their arses. But I can't say that to Ma'am, she'd kill me. There's a gramophone at Mrs. O'Connor's playing an Irish jig or a reel, and boys and girls are dancing around, kicking their legs out and keeping their hands to their sides. Mrs. O'Connor is a great fat woman, and when she stops the record to show the steps, all the fat from her chin to her ankles jiggles, and I wonder how she can teach the dancing. She comes over to my mother and says, so this is little Frankie. I think we have the makings of a dancer here. Boys and girls, do we have the makings of a dancer here? We do, Mrs. O'Connor. Ma'am says, I have the sixpence, Mrs. O'Connor. Ah, yes, Mrs. McCourt, hold on a minute. She waddles to a table and brings over the head of a black boy with kinky hair, big eyes, huge red lips and an open mouth. She tells me, put the sixpence in the mouth and take my hand out before the black boy bites me. All the boys and girls watch and they have little smiles. I drop in the sixpence and pull my hand back before the mouth snaps shut. Everyone laughs, and I know they wanted to see my hand caught in the mouth. Mrs. O'Connor gasps and laughs and says to my mother, isn't that a howl, Mrs.? Ma'am says it's a howl. She tells me, behave myself and come home dancing. I don't want to stay in this place where Mrs. O'Connor can't take the sixpence herself instead of letting me nearly lose my hand in the black boy's mouth. I don't want to stay in this place where you have to stand in line with boys and girls. Straighten your back, hands by your side, look ahead, don't look down, move your feet, look at Cyril, and there goes Cyril, all dressed up in his saffron kilt and the medals jingling, medals for this and medals for that, and the girls love Cyril and Mrs. O'Connor loves Cyril, for didn't he bring her fame, and didn't she teach him every step he knows? Oh, dance, Cyril, dance, oh, Jesus, he floats around the room, he's an angel out of heaven, and stop the frowning Frankie McCourt, or you'll have a puss on you like a pound of tripe. Dance, Frankie, dance. Pick up your feet for the love of Jesus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Maura, will you help that Frankie McCourt before he ties his 2 feet around his head entirely? Help him, Maura. Maura's a big girl, about 10. She dances up to me with her white teeth and her dancer's dress with all the gold and yellow and green figures that are supposed to come from olden times. And she says, give me your hand, little boy. and she wheels me around the room till I'm dizzy and making a pure idiot of myself, and blushing and foolish till I want to cry, but I'm saved when the record stops and the gramophone goes whoosh, whoosh. Mrs. O'Connor says, "Oh, thank you, Maura, and next week, Cyril, you can show Frankie a few of the steps that made you famous. Next week, boys and girls, and don't forget the sixpence for the little black boy." Boys and girls leave together. I make my own way down the stairs and out the door, hoping my pals won't see me with boys who wear kilts and girls with white teeth and fancy dresses from olden times. Mam is having tea with Bridie Hannon, her friend from next door. Mam says, "What did you learn?" And makes me dance around the kitchen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3. She has a good laugh with Bridie. That's not too bad for your first time. In a month, you'll be a regular Cyril Benson. I don't want to be Cyril Benson. I want to be Fred Astaire. They turn hysterical, laughing and squirting tea out of their mouths. "Jesus love him," says Bridie. "Doesn't he have a great notion of himself? Fred Astaire, how are you?" Mam says Fred Astaire went to his lessons every Saturday and didn't go around kicking the toes out of his boots. And if I wanted to be like him, I'd have to go to Mrs. O'Connor's every single week. The fourth Saturday morning, Billy Campbell knocks at our door. "Mrs. McCourt, can Frankie come out and play?" Mam tells him, "No, Billy, Frankie is going to his dancing lessons." He waits for me at the bottom of Barrack Hill. He wants to know why I'm dancing, that everyone knows dancing is a sissy thing, and I'll wind up like Cyril Benson wearing a kilt and medals and dancing all over with girls. He says next thing I'll be sitting in the kitchen knitting socks. He says dancing will destroy me and I won't be fit to play any kind of football, soccer, rugby or Gaelic football itself because the dancing teaches you to run like a sissy and everyone will laugh. I tell him I'm finished with the dancing, that I have sixpence in my pocket from Mrs. O'Connor's that's supposed to go into the black boy's mouth, that I'm going to the Lyric Cinema instead. Sixpence will get the two of us in with tuppence left over for 2 squares of Cleve's toffee, and Billy and I have a great time looking at the riders of the Purple Sage. Dad is sitting by the fire with Mam, and they want to know what steps I learned today and what they're called. I already did the Siege of Ennis and the Walls of Limerick, which are real dances. Now I have to make up names and dances. Mam says she never heard of a dance called the Siege of Dingle. But if that's what I learned, go ahead, dance it. And I dance around the kitchen with my hands down by my sides, making my own music. Diddly-idle, doodle-die, diddly-idle, doodle-die. Dad and Mam clapping in time with my feet. Dad says, "Ah, that's a fine dancing, and you'll be a powerful Irish dancer, and a credit to the men who died for their country." Mam says that wasn't worth much for sixpence. Next week it's a George Raft film, and the week after that a cowboy film with George O'Brien. Then it's James Cagney. And I can't take Billy because I want to get a bar of chalk to go with my Cleve's toffee. And I'm having a great time till there's a terrible pain in my jaw and it's a tooth out of my gum stuck in my toffee and the pain is killing me. Still, I can't waste the toffee, so I pull out the tooth and put it in my pocket and chew the toffee on the other side of my mouth, blood and all. There's pain on one side and the delicious toffee on the other. And I remember what my Uncle Pa Keating would say, "There are times when you wouldn't know whether to shit or go blind." I have to go home now and worry because you can't go through the world short of tooth without your mother knowing. Mothers know everything, and she's always looking into our mouths to see if there's any class of a disease there. She's there by the fire, and Dad is there, and they're asking me the same old questions, the dance and the name of the dance. I tell them I learned the Walls of Cork. And I dance around the kitchen trying to hum a made-up tune and dying with the pain in my tooth. Mam says, "Waltz of Cork, my eye, there's no such dance." And Dad says, "Come over here. Stand there before me. Tell us the truth. Did you go to your dancing classes today?" Can't tell a lie anymore because my gum is killing me and there's blood in my mouth. Besides, I know they know everything, and that's what they're telling me now. Some snake of a boy from the dancing school saw me going to the Lyric Cinema and told, and Mrs. O'Connor sent a note to say she hadn't seen me in ages. And was I all right, because I had great promise and could follow in the footsteps of the great Cyril Benson. Dad doesn't care about my tooth or anything. He says I'm going to confession and drags me over to the Redemptorist Church because it's Saturday and confessions go on all day. He tells me I'm a bad boy. He's ashamed of me that I went to the pictures instead of learning Ireland's national dances, the jig, the reel, the dances that men and women fought and died for down these sad centuries. He says there's many a young man that was hanged and now mouldering in a lime pit that would be glad to rise up and dance the Irish dance. The priest is old and I have to yell my sins at him. And he tells me I'm a hooligan for going to the pictures instead of my dancing lessons, although he thinks himself that dancing is a dangerous thing, almost as bad as the films that stirs up thoughts sinful in themselves. But even if dancing is an abomination, I sin by taking my mother's sixpence and lying. There's a hot place in hell for the likes of me. Say a decade of the rosy and ask God's forgiveness for your dancing at the gates of hell itself, child. End of my dancing career. School. Between the church and the school, we suffered greatly. And this is a glimpse at the kind of teaching that was afforded us in Leamy's National School at this time. Years later, I became a teacher in New York City in high school. And since I left school when I was 13 in Ireland and went to get for a job as a messenger boy, and didn't go, I never went to secondary school, high school, and then came to New York and got all kinds of menial jobs. And I guess I'd still be in a menial job were it not for the Chinese. Because the Korean War broke out and Mao Zedong sent his army across the Yellow River into Korea. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Mao Zedong for liberating me from the menial job that I had in New York. So the army got worried, I mean the United States got worried about the Koreans and the Chinese, and they turned to me. And they drafted me, and they knew I was too good to be wasted in Korea, so they sent me to Germany to train dogs for 2 years. Well, I trained dogs all right, but I developed also a great fondness for the beers of Germany. So I had a great time in Germany. When I got out, then I didn't know what to do with myself, so I was having a few beers in the White Horse Bar down in the village, and I got fed up there. I said, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Work at these menial jobs and so on. So I walked across Washington Square, and there was NYU. I applied. And they laughed hysterically at the idea of me going in there without a high school diploma or any kind of high school. But they let me in on probation for a year, providing I maintained a B average, which I did after this kind of education that I got in Limerick. It was easy to maintain a B average at NYU. Then I got a teaching job when I graduated, and that's another story. Mr. O'Neill is the master in the 4th class of school. We call him Dotty because he's small like a dot. He teaches in the one classroom with a platform so that he can stand above us and threaten us with his ash plant and peel his apple for all to see. The first day of school in September, he writes on the blackboard 3 words which are to stay there the rest of the year. Euclid, geometry, idiot. He says if he catches any boy interfering with these words, that boy will go through the rest of his life with one hand. He says anyone who doesn't understand the theorems of Euclid is an idiot. Now repeat after me. Anyone who doesn't understand the theorems of Euclid is an idiot. Of course, we all know what an idiot is because that's what the masters keep telling us we are. Brendan Quigley raises his hand. Sir, what's a theorem? Or what's a Euclid? We expect Dotty to lash at Brendan the way all the masters do when you ask them a question, but he looks at Brendan with a little smile. Ah, now, here's a boy with not one, but 2 questions. What's your name, boy? Brendan Quigley, sir. This is a boy who will go far. Where will he go, boys? Far, sir. Indeed, and he will. The boy who wants to know something about the grace, elegance, and beauty of Euclid can go nowhere but up. In what direction and no other can this boy go, boys? Up, sir. Without Euclid, boys, mathematics would be a poor, doddering thing. Without Euclid, we wouldn't be able to go from here to there. Without Euclid, the bicycle would have no wheel. Without Euclid, St. Joseph could not have been a carpenter, for carpentry is geometry, and geometry is carpentry. Without Euclid, this very school could never have been built. Behind me, Paddy Closey mutters, feckin' Euclid. Dotty barks at him, you, boy, what's your name? Closey, sir. Ah, the boy flies on one wing. What's your Christian name? Paddy. Paddy what? Paddy, sir. And what, Paddy, were you saying to McCourt? I said we should get down on our 2 knees and thank God for Euclid. I'm sure you did, Clossie. I see the lie festering in your teeth. What do I see, boys? The lie, sir. And what is the lie doing, boys? Festering, sir. Where, boys, where? In his teeth, sir. Euclid, boys, was a Greek. Clossie, what is a Greek? Some class of a foreigner, sir. Clossie, you are a half-wit. Now, Brendan, surely you know what a Greek is. Yes, sir. Euclid was a Greek. Dottie gives him a little smile. He tells Clossie he should model himself on Quigley, who knows what a Greek is. He draws 2 lines side by side and tells us these are parallel lines, and the magical and mysterious thing is they never, never meet. Not if they were to be extended for infinity, not if they were extended to God's shoulders. And that, boys, is a long way. Though there's a German Jew who's upsetting the whole world with his ideas on parallel lines. We listen to Dottie and wonder what all this has to do with the state of the world, with the Germans marching everywhere and bombing everything that stands. We can't ask him ourselves, but we can get Brendan Quigley to do it. Anyone can see Brendan is the master's pet, and that means he can ask any questions he likes. After school, we tell Brendan he has to ask that question tomorrow. What use is Euclid and all those lines that go on forever when the Germans are bombing everything that stands? Brendan says he doesn't want to be the master's pet. He didn't ask for it, and he doesn't want to ask the question. He's afraid if he asks that question, Dottie will attack him. We tell him if he doesn't ask that question, we'll attack him. Next day, Brendan raises his hand. Dottie gives him the little smile. Sir, what use is Euclid and all the lines when the Germans are bombing everything that stands? The little smile is gone. Ah, Brendan. Ah, Quigley. Oh, boys, oh, boys. He lays his stick on the desk and stands on the platform with his eyes closed. What use is Euclid, he says, what use? Without Euclid, the Messerschmitt could never have taken to the sky. Without Euclid, the Spitfire could not dart from cloud to cloud. Euclid brings us grace and beauty and elegance. What does he bring us, boys? Grace, sir, and elegance, sir, and beauty, sir. Euclid is complete in himself and divine in application. Do you understand that, boys? We do, sir. I doubt it, boys. I doubt it. To love Euclid is to be alone in the world. He opens his eyes and sighs, and you can see the eyes are a little watery. Do you have any questions? About Euclid or anything? Well, I guess that if you have no questions, it means you've grasped the deeper meaning of this book. Because in a few years, there will be Cliff Notes, Monarch Notes, Barnes & Noble Study Guide. I'm writing it myself. Complete with multiple choice questions, fill in the blank spaces, matching questions, and short essay questions.
Unless you answer in the book, I'm really curious why your parents came from Ireland, went to New York, and then went back to Ireland.
Well, they came separately. He came from the north and she came from the south, and they met in New York. And I think they met around Thanksgiving, I'm not sure. They were married in March. I was born in August. I was conceived, as they say, beyond the sheets, in what the Irish call a knee trembler, that the act performed against a wall. So they had me. The next year they had my brother Malachi. The following year they had twins. The following year they had a little girl. My mother had, how many? Six children in 5.5 years. Was that possible? 6 children in 5.5? 5 children in 5.5 years. She had twins. So the little girl died in Brooklyn, and then she had a nervous breakdown. My father was, he was probably upset is hardly the word, ravaged by this. So they went back to Ireland. They left a depression in America and went to Ireland. Now, an American depression is a fairly joyful thing compared with the depression in Ireland. A depression in Ireland is like living in Calcutta with rain. And that's what they went back to. And there were no jobs there. There was nothing. Nothing. When I say nothing, nothing. There were no jobs. My father couldn't get a job because we were in Limerick, and he had a northern accent. Now, it's hard for you to believe. It would be like a man from New Hampshire going down to Alabama in 1925. He'd be run out of town. So even when he did get a job, they always looked for excuses to fire him. So we dreamed anyway, Malachi and I, especially since we were born here, of going back to America, which we did. And that's part of the story here.
Michael planned?
Was
Michael planned?
Planned?
Yeah.
Oh, Mike, well here, she had Malachi, me, Malachi, the twins, Margaret, and then Michael, the father.
In Limerick.
In Limerick, yeah. And then Alfie, who was the last one. Alfie was 10 years younger than me, and he was the only one that had any kind of a chance in Ireland. He's the only one who went to secondary school. And we had great hopes for him. He went to secondary school, the Christian Brothers, he came over here, and he was in the army here, and then he had the GI Bill too, and we thought, he went to Colombia and everything, and we thought, we had great hopes, so he gave it all up and opened up a Mexican restaurant. The only Irishman you've ever heard of who opened them. He's a strange character.
Where were you stationed in Germany?
It's south of Munich, in a place called Lengries. Dog training country. Ochon, Ochon, or Ach. That's a northern expression. Cuchulainn? Well, Cuchulainn, there are lots of stories about Cuchulainn, except he was the way American kids grab onto Superman, I grabbed onto Cuchulainn. He was the Irish mythic hero, Irish Achilles, if you want to call him. And he was a tragic. And I was, anytime I went to Dublin, I went to the General Post Office in Dublin, there's a statue of Cuchulainn there. It's about the size of the podium. And I like the way he died. We Irish love things about death. It's one of our great pastimes, dying. For instance, when I was a kid, people were dying of TB all over the place, consumption, or galloping consumption. So whenever there was a funeral, we would go to it. We had nothing else to do. We'd go around the neighborhood, gangs of urchins. You know the way you see kids wandering the street and they're always up to something? Well, we were always up to something, looking for something to do. And we were 8 or 9 years old, and we would see a house with a wreath on the door and a card, a purple bordered mourning card announcing the demise of whoever in the house. So there was also a tradition in Ireland when somebody died, the prayers of little children would get them into heaven. So we'd knock on the door, and you couldn't turn away little children. We'd like to come in and say a prayer, Mrs. Oh yeah, come in, the widow, yeah, come in and kneel down. We go in and kneel by the bed, and of course there were no funeral homes. The body was there. It might be there for 3 or 4 days because they couldn't bear to get rid of it, and it sometimes was quite rancid, quite juicy, and they'd have incense and candles and flowers and everything. So I remember one time one of our schoolmates died. Clement O'Hanlon was his name. He died of TB, and usually people became emaciated, but Clement swelled up. He swelled up and then he shrunk again. So there's Clement in the bed. And when I went in, Mrs. O'Hanlon said, poor Clement, his little friends come in and pray for him. So I got this awful feeling that Clement looked exactly like a monkey. And I wanted to laugh. But you can't laugh at a dead boy. So then she says, kiss him. To me. No, it's all right, Mrs. O'Hanlon. Kiss him. So she lifts me up and she pushes me at him. And I'll never forget the smell of Clement O'Hanlon. He was a nice kid, but not when he was dead. So we went to all these funerals. We went and we'd go to the graveyard to see them buried. And Malachi and I went to so many funerals, we belonged to the Death of the Month Club. That's it.
Outside some books?
Yeah. Book.
I was just going to ask you about the timing of the book. Why now?
Or why I didn't write it earlier?
Yeah.
I don't think I would have had the distance that I have now that I'm older and less wise. I think I would have, I might have had a chip on my shoulder, I might have had scores to settle and so on, but I had to get over that and try to give it, and not impose that on the reader. It's an imposition.
In other words, you were dysfunctional before it was fashionable.
Oh, yeah. I was everything before it was fashionable. 27 years. And one of my students is here. She just introduced me. And I meet them everywhere. I think I had estimated that in my career I had 10,000 students. Public. Oh, yeah. That's where I learned anything I know. They taught me.
What was the musical review that you did with your brother, and is there...
A Couple of Blackguards.
Mm-hmm. When did you do that?
We started in 1984, and we did it around the country. We went to Chicago for 3 weeks and stayed for a year. We went to San Francisco for 3 weeks and stayed for 5 months. So we've been doing it on and off. But I'm finished with that.
Do you use some of the songs that were...
One, yeah. It's not really a musical, it's a storyteller. Well, I told my editor in New York, she asked me when this book would be finished. This was July of 1995. And I plucked the date over there. I said, I'll bring it to you on the birthday of my favorite writer, Jonathan Swift, the 30th of November. And I delivered it on the 30th. She was shocked. You're not supposed to do that. So I'm planning the birthday of James Joyce, February 2nd, 1998.
Did you ever hear anything from your dad again?
I saw him once in his coffin in Belfast. I went to his funeral. I don't know why. I just felt, well, you do things sometimes because in the back of your head, you're going to write a book.
Mind if I ask another question? Did you ever find that blonde? You always dreamed of walking down the streets of...
I did, unfortunately. Married one of them.
We'd like to thank you. We're going to ask you to line up going back this way with your books. The books are for sale at the cash register right behind you if you'd like to pick one up. And Mr. McCourt will be personalizing this evening, so we'll come around and ask you what you'd like written down. Thank you for coming. Let me get these out.
Passing books, I think.
Yeah, you're passing books.
What do you want, the rules over here?
Yeah, come over here.
You should get off the time for this guy.
To Dinah on her 79th birthday, and something about Belfast. My mother was born and raised in Belfast. This is my mother.
This man doesn't know anything about Belfast,
Yes, I
except
do.
his dad was born
I
there.
was there. I was there in May. I have cousins all over Belfast.
Oh, do you?
2 of them were visiting me recently. And I've been there a number of times in the last couple of years.
Good. I was there last year.
Well, things are not so good there right now. I was there at Christmas, it was lovely. Then talks broke down. Oh, about Belfast. There's something about Belfast. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you're from New York?
No, I'm the salesman here in the Midwest. I'm Simon Schuster and Scribner.
How lucky can you be?
Well, I think pretty lucky.
He truly is.
To Frank?
To Frank, one blackguard to another, from Frank. Thank you. This is for Helen and Tim.
was having a big conversation with my neighbor next door who comes from McCourt, actually. And she said, you know, she read the review in the Post-Dispatch. She said, I don't think that existed in court. I think, well, didn't look.
It existed.
The review.
You have to be able to see it.
When Sunday's paper?
3 weeks ago.
If you could just, your name would be fine.
So it wasn't this past Sunday, it was at least the week before that.
Thank you.
Hi. To anyone in particular?
Oh, you can, if you just sign it and date it, that would be great. Thank you very much. It was a really good presentation. Nice to hear you.
Years of training. Years of training. Book signing school.
You like working your fingers out a little?
Yeah.
You just have to trust me that it makes sense.
And